Smith. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. How are you today, Jim?
Doing all right. Ready
Good,
for
good.
another live cast and ready for to dive into some pretty cool stuff. Today, we're going to be looking at change and mastering reframing. For those of us who may be new to us, again, my name is Jim Case, and this is Dr. Jeff Smith, and this is Adventures in Truth. And each show, we kind of pull a thread on what's considered truth or what we see as truth or what may be portrayed as truth, and we kind of do deep dives on those topics to really kind of unravel them and find a new perspective for how to understand them in relation to our own personal development, transformation, and of course the transformation of anyone and everyone across the planet. So we're super psyched to have you here, super glad that you're here to join us and participate in the show. And so we're going to talk about some change. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Well, change is what Obama ran his platform on. So clearly it's a coined term, pun fully intended. Change is one of those things where everyone knows that it's necessary, but it seems everyone also has resistance toward it. For example, I can recall 30-something years ago in my own psychotherapy, one of the signs on the wall in my therapist's office said, "Change is good. You go first." And
Sorry, that was awesome.
Yeah, that always stuck with me as, again, we all seem to want it, but my goodness, we are some serious creatures of habit with regard to whatever we would call normal, even if our normal is prison. Getting people to let go of their experiences of what their normal is really difficult. And it's, the fear of the unknown. Everything always comes back to fear as a reason why we hang on to what was rather than being bold and courageous and stepping into what could be or what we want to be. So change is a universal topic that, my goodness, it's so rich and deep. It's a minefield of things to discover and explore, as well as progress. It's an area rich for potential progress for how we can really begin to flow and get out of resistance. So, change is one of those things that goes back to some of the core topics we've discussed in the past regarding flow, which would orient change in a positive direction, and resistance, which would resist change and, keep us stuck where we are. So great kind of a background for stepping into the topic of change. I mentioned Obama having made that the, key for his platform, or one of the mantras for his platform. And I think, President Trump tried to do the same thing with regard to draining the swamp, which is, he used to initiate change. And, I'm not trying to measure that or say he has or has not achieved that, but that was a desired, he recognized that doing something different is what he sensed a great deal of the American people wanting. But, oh my gosh, as soon as you start messing with finances and people's rice bowls and political structures having been in place for as long as they have, sometimes it's life and death for some people in creating the door and the opportunity for change. So although it seems like a simple word, the actual process of it can be very, very simple. In one of my most recent hero's dose level journeys using plant-based medicines, I was traveling with the masters, and they showed me how easy change can be, but you really do have to create an ability to get into a metaphysical state of mind to bring and resonate with that energy that change requires to step into that, to move forward. So it's simple, but yet it does require discipline and achieving certain techniques or paths. There are many, there's more than one for sure, in how to step into a change process. I think Tibetan monks, it's been long noted that by them focusing on the living in the moment, They do not do pattern recognition the way most people do. There's been many studies where people have been asked to listen to a series of sounds that make, like dot dash dot 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 dash, and then they'd repeat dot dash dot 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 dash. Well, when the monks went to do this, every time they were asked to repeat, they didn't repeat anything because there was nothing to repeat in this moment. The moment that they lived in, where they heard that sequence of sounds, had already passed, and they were in this moment where there was no sound, so they repeated no sound. And that blew the administrators of the study away. That how is that possible that you actually forgot what just happened 5 to 10 seconds ago? And they're like, well, what would the point be of living 5 to 10 seconds ago? So just a fascinating mindset to bring about change. So what do you think about the whole topic? You got me kind of going into that for about 5 minutes.
Well, I've got, let's go where we always like to go, which is first, let's define what change is according to the metric, the dictionary, the thing that we sort of thrive to understand concepts of who we are. So the first step is going to be about looking at the definition. So for you guys out there that are listening and watching, how do you define change for yourself? How do you see it? What is it? What is that experience for you? And just take a second with that as we look at the definition, because I'm going to present a concept that might be a little weird for some, but I'm going to go for it anyway because I think it's good. So the definition of change is to make a difference in the state or condition of a thing, or to substitute another state or condition. That's the actual technical definition of the noun change. And I found that absolutely fascinating because it's always interesting to me when we go to do the definition thing, because I assume I have a pretty good idea of what a word means, and then I go read the definition and go, holy crap, that's not even close to my understanding, and what it's actually defined as are either more or less than I would have thought. And in this case, it was much more. The idea, and because it actually speaks to what you and I talk about every single show in shifting state and creating a condition for change, for things to be different. So here's the concept I want to kind of throw out there and play along with if you'd like. So Jeff was talking about the resistance to change and our challenges with change. And I want to set this back in a much broader perspective as opposed to into our daily stuff. So I have a concept that there are essentially two consciousnesses that inhabit our experience. There's the ego consciousness and there is a soul, the larger part of us, the connection, the spark to God. And then there's the consciousness that animates and runs the physical body and makes sure it stays on the planet. To my way of thinking, the challenge with change for us, the challenge that we encounter with change as a species, is that those two consciousnesses go into rebellion or go into tension with each other, because the ego, the part that wants to keep the body on the planet, keep the body working and moving and doing things, is dialed directly into the fight or flight mechanism. And as Jeff rightly pointed out earlier, fear is the motivating factor here in the process. So you have this part of our consciousness that is trying to stay safe. It's hooked into the five senses. It's monitoring the field, making sure there's no saber-toothed tiger is going to eat us, and all that kind of stuff. In the meantime, we are getting projected onto our field and into our world all of these fear-based ideas, thoughts, concepts. If you take it all from where we are right now, within the pandemic, everything is fear. There's very little that isn't about fear, and you have to really individually kind of pull yourself together there. But it's also calling on great change at the same time. So it's actually showing the dynamic in real time, where the ego is going to want to scream and yell and throw up all kinds of fireworks and flares and resistance, and this is not good, and we're not going to survive, and how are we going to make it? While the soul is going, wow, what an opportunity. What an opportunity I have to create some massive change in my life. And the ego's going, yeah, but that's not the same as it was yesterday, and I can't live if it's not the same as it was yesterday, and on we go. So that's the core foundation of this of my thought process about this, is that, again, it's about shifting state, and that the change is actually just getting the state shifted, and then the work begins. Because once the change is once the shift has happened, once the energy of the vibration has elevated to a new place, now it's all about integration. That's change. So once you become new into this new spaces, and again, I'm going to reference another a great reference point from Jeff, talking about the monk not being willing to go in the past even 5 seconds because there's nothing there. The same reality is true for all of us. There's nothing there. It's all imagination and story. So the process of change becomes this push-pull within our own experience and our own consciousness of, do I elevate or don't I elevate? Do I expand or don't I expand? Do I release fear or don't I release fear? So that to me is sort of the foundation of where I'm going with this. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. I'm looking at Jackie's question or comment about changes for self, but what happens when your change affects the immediate circle around you? So I was just thinking about what Jim had to say about state change. So we probably could look up the definition of state so that we have more clarity on, because that was a key word in the definition of change. So in order to understand change, we have to understand what state is. Generally, it would be in terms of an energetic idea that you're changing the amount of energy and or the type of energy, either negative, neutral, or positive, about how you're showing up, about how you're appearing or involved in whatever activities or arrangements or groups that you're a part of. So if I understand Jackie's question correctly, she's talking about if you make a change for yourself, that is going to affect the group. So in some way, you can have group cohesion that agrees to make certain changes and then attempt to show up that way and evaluate how that's different. And if positive, keep it. If better than it was, then keep that, yet keep going. And if it didn't work, then, scrub it, chalk it up to experience, regroup, and try it again. But I think where Jackie's going again with this question is that other people are going to notice. They're going to have a sense that something's different. Even as something as simple as changing your cologne or changing your perfume, and then you show up around a group and they notice it. It may be subtle and sub-perceptual, but in some way people are going to notice. You get your hair cut, you buy some new shoes. I don't know why. Why do people notice everybody else's new shoes? It's always a strange thing. But that little thing brings about change. Like, did your grandmother die and you got some inheritance and you bought some new shoes? Or, it's just, who knows where that's kind of a weird conversation that just, popped into my head about where all that could go regarding just the simple observation of new shoes, which isn't really what Jim and I are hopefully bringing a topic more in depth than changing your shoes.
I would actually jump in here for a second, because to the point that you're making and to Jackie's question, from my perspective and based on what I was just talking about, it's all about energy. So what happens when you change affects the immediate circle around you? Absolutely. When your vibration changes, everything around you either has to adapt or go away. It's not even like it's science. It's a basic, I think it's physics, or maybe it's quantum physics. I'm not sure which it is, but so you're talking about the shoes. The thing that makes that happen is the energy that the individual has about their new shoes draws attention to their new shoes. Because how many of us, when we buy new shoes, don't actually feel pretty cool when we get our new shoes? What's the reason we bought them? It's very rare that you go buy shoes and go, these look like shit. Why don't I go wear these? You want to buy something that you want to have, you want to sparkle somehow, or you want to you want to present. And the shoe is the way that somehow we have, as I know in my own head, as soon as you said it, I went, my God, I do it every time. I always notice the micro changes around me because it's the energy that's present in now. If you go back to it again, it's the energy present right now in the moment of that person's field. They're going, my shoes, my shoes, my shoes, my shoes, because for them it's a good thing. It's pretty, it's lovely, it's whatever it is. So to Jackie's point, again, not to get too diverted by the shoes, but it's a great example. The effect of immediate circle around you. I want to use a quick example that we've talked about on the show a couple times that Michael and I have talked about. And that is the idea of, especially in relationship, however you're being in relationship, the important thing, as I was telling to Michael, I was experiencing a ton of change happening in my world. My connection, my consciousness was changing in ways that I was still adjusting to. And so Mike and I sat down and talked about it. And I said, look, you don't have to do what I do. You don't have to think like I think. You don't have to go to things that I want to go to. But what you got to do is stay in the ballpark. You got to stay in the ballpark of where my energy is going at this point, because I seem to be taking the lead at this point. So you got to stay in the ballpark of my energy, because what happens over time is that if you can't maintain that, or you can't stay there, you have a vibration here and you have a vibration here. And then they start to go like this. And now they're no longer communicating at all, because you didn't stay in the field with each other. So when you make monumental change, or even minor change, and that change comes through in your field, everybody around you has to make adjustments. And they either will or they won't. And if they won't, maybe because they can't, maybe because they don't want to, whatever the case may be, then those relationships will change. And the same is true for us on the receiving end. We're around people all the time that are going through adjustment and change. And as their energy changes, we either lean in or we lean back, because it depends on where it sits in our vibration, where we resonate with each other now. That changes everything. So excellent question, Jackie. We really appreciate very much the question. It's a good one.
I can talk a little bit more in depth about what happens with the immediate circle around you. I was personally thinking about my adventure or journey with regard to spirituality and religion, and having once upon a time been a very devoted, even went to a systematic educational system called School of Discipleship for studying Christianity. And a number of years ago, I found that I had outgrown my beliefs about Christianity, and that I found the universe much bigger than, and spirituality much deeper than what I was experiencing the limits of Christianity. And having, I obviously, well, it may not be obvious, but I think typically people that pursue that come from a family where they learned that as a child, and certainly that was the case with me. And I haven't necessarily walked away from Christianity. I mean, my core beliefs are still that we live in a universe that has a divine creator, and it's benevolent for the most part, if you can stay away from Old Testament stuff and stay away from the ideas of getting punished for all eternity if you're out of alignment with the rule book. That's the part that I outgrew. But everything else stays the same. But I notice when I'm talking with my core inner circle family members, sometimes there's an eyebrow raising, or there's maybe a subtle rolling of the eyes or something when there's a prayer offered, or there's a statement made that either I may not agree with completely or fully. And where I'm going with this is it creates resistance in, can I fully be and live in who and what I am right now, because of the potential of being rejected and not understood, and no longer feeling like you're in alignment or in a wholesome company of the people that you love and respect and cherish the most. And that creates fear of putting the brakes on to any potential further changes that you want to make. So I find that a lot of people, and particularly in my practice, they come in asking for the how do I make changes. So change for me is, the how part is actually fairly easy, because there's how-to books about everything. You don't actually need to go to a therapist to learn how to make changes in your life. There's plenty of self-help books out there that can teach you to do that. But what therapy seems to be about is really exploring the motivations behind the why do I want to make these changes, and then empowering the person to be brave enough and stick with the effort that it takes to stay in the change process and to keep going with it.
Hmm.
So that was perhaps a very long-winded answer, or more depth to the what keeps us sometimes from making change, because of the fear of the effects that it will have in the immediate circle around us. And we just have to have open, honest dialogue with them and just let them know, hey, I'm still basically the same person. I still love this and believe that and do this. But I'm just not quite so anal, if you will. It may not be the right word to use, but it's what came to me about all the details of what certain organizations require you to make a statement of affirmation about, or something like that. So anyway, we have to move into being brave and courageous to keep our change process going, knowing that there will be, by design, people in our life, in our core circle, that are going to um, present a resistance to seeing that change unfold.
And that's a really good observation too, is recognizing that those moments of contrast, as they're called, or moments of resistance, are opportunities for you to stand in your clarity. And that's part of what the challenge of change is that we didn't actually plan to go here, but I'm going to go here for just a second because I think it's important to lay this foundational piece regarding change. And that's this idea of energy up and energy down. We're going to dive in here just in a second about the top 5 beliefs about change and the reason that it's a challenge for people. But what I want to point out in this is that energy up, energy down. So in the process of making change, we make change because we believe that the outcome, the thing we perceive, the way we're going to feel in this at the other side of this change, is expanded, uplifted, better, happy, joyful, whatever it is that you're choosing as the reason for making the change or the reason for stepping into it. There's a something on the other side that feels really uplifting to you usually. If it doesn't, then chances are good the choice you're going to make is probably not the useful choice in that moment, and you're best to sit back until the energy is at least neutral at best, but best if it's spiraling up. Because there's lots of times in the process of choosing or making choices that we get kind of confused. And this goes back to what I was talking to earlier, these conflicting kind of consciousnesses within us, the ego that's wanting to stay stable and safe and in sameness, and the part of us that wants to evolve and grow and change and step into this larger part of ourselves. When those callings of change come, there's a sense of, or even if it's just day-to-day stuff, little things that you need to make decisions on, you can stop and get quiet for that moment and feel where your energy's going around that change. If it's spiraling up, follow it, go with it, let the flow happen, because that's where it will be the easiest. If it's not, step back and let it percolate some more. Let yourself find out more information, but give yourself permission to just be with it until the energy's going in the upward direction, going in a direction that ultimately, when you really tap into the inside of yourself, is moving in a trajectory that's uplifting. And that may not look it, because sometimes, if you're in a bad marriage or you're in an abusive relationship, the idea of leaving is difficult because that's what you're used to. And gosh, this is okay, and that's okay, and that's okay, but this piece isn't okay, and I don't know. Sit in it, be in it, be with it until you feel where the energy of the change takes you. And the change in the energy, that energy change, is where you want to focus yourself. Because while it may look hard or it may feel uncomfortable, what we ultimately feel is that sense of yes, 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 yes. And that happens with small stuff and it happens with big stuff. So just some food for thought there as you navigate your own change platform or your own change process, to consider that as well. So top 5 beliefs about change. We can spend as little or as much time as we want here, but we wanted to lay the foundation for understanding what we're already talking about, which is this kind of internal conflict that goes on. Some of it is directly from that sameness perspective, and some of it is not. So first belief, it's hard. How many times have you said that? Have you heard that? Have you been a part of that experience? Yeah, it can be. Change doesn't have to be hard, but it can be. It's definitely challenging. I think when you're changing the core of your vibrational experience to something you've never been to before, that's challenging. You're navigating waters you've never been in before. You're encountering thought processes and ideas that are relatively or brand new because of the new perspective. That's a big deal. That's a huge thing to step into change and see because sometimes the change is little, so that shift is only incremental, but what the bigger change is, it's much larger, to Jackie's question as well. You have that same exponential experience, small change to big change. So when it becomes big change, you really feel the impact.
I'm thinking about an example of change, Jim, and a lot of times people are wanting to find their purpose, their main true purpose for being here on the planet in this incarnation. And I did a plant-based journey about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and in my notes after my journey, I was just absolutely blown away by watching how simple change can actually be. I referenced that a few moments ago. The masters that I was hanging out with, Jesus, Babaji, Krishna, Yogananda, they took me grocery shopping to Ralph's, of all places. And it was fascinating that while we were there, when we were going through the checkout stand, one of the masters asked me if the lady that was checking us out through the process of buying your items asked me, "Do you think that this woman came to the planet to be a checkout clerk?" And I said, well, without judging it, there's nothing wrong with being a checkout clerk, but does this look like a purpose for which a person would come to the planet to do? And I said, no, I don't think this is her purpose. This job that she's doing is likely not her purpose for being on the planet. And then they asked me, so why do you think she's doing it? And I said, well, because she doesn't know what else to do, hasn't figured out something's missing. And they said, no, we want to show you how we see her. And so they did. They showed me how the masters actually saw her, and she was radiant, divine, glowing, beaming. I got to see her in the way that they see her, which is in her astral or celestial state, in a dimension beyond the one that we actually live in, and say our true self, our higher self, if you will. And then they said, now we're going to let her see herself the way we see her. And then she got to see herself in the way that the masters saw her, and she immediately recognized where she was in the grocery store with her apron on, and she's like, what am I doing here? This is not where I belong. This is not what I am supposed to be doing. And she literally just walked out of the store. It's like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing now. And I went, wow, that is so amazing. Literally in the twinkle of an eye, she realized she was not doing the job in the environment that she knew she came to the planet to do. And so as we walked out of the stores with our Ralph's shopping bags, imagine Jesus and Krishna and the guys shopping for food. It was very, very interesting. But the lesson that I took away from that is one of the reasons that we believe change is hard is because we don't know who we are. And we're trying to figure out what we're here supposed to be doing without knowing who we are first. We're trying to do step 2 before we do step 1. So if you want to make it hard, keep doing step 2 first, which is, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing here? And trying all of these different things and getting frustrated over time and choosing to have a job that works, but it's not what you really know. You don't get excited every morning. You get up and go, oh, I get to go do this again. You turn to hobbies, or you turn to substances, or you turn to other things for satisfying that empty feeling inside of, I'm not living my purpose. So if you don't want change to be hard, step 1 is you got to know who you are. In order to know who you are, in my opinion, of which I'm willing to be wrong, but I'm probably not, you have to have some kind of a spiritual practice that allows you to see and experience who you are in the true state, not the state of the physical. It's more in the metaphysical, or like I said, in the astral or the celestial. And if those are terms you're not familiar with, then just keep plugging into this show with us. Keep tuning into the show as we get the opportunity to share all this great information with people. Hopefully you find it exciting. So once again, if you don't want change to be hard, you first have to know who you are. And then the changes will be very, very easy to put into place, because you can't not do, I know that's a double negative and I said it intentionally, you can't not do what you are here to do if you do know who you are. And that takes a little bit of time to learn, but it's once you get there, oh my gosh, that's when all the fun, great stuff shows up.
Yep. All right, moving on to belief number 2, I'll be different. And the answer to that statement is yes, indeed you will. And it is good. I'll be different. I think over time, and especially over the course of my lifetime, that has been, and in the last 10 years, has become much less of a thing, but it's still pretty powerful and pretty prevalent in the consciousnesses that I don't, we as a species tend to look for our tribe. We want to make sure that we're included. We want to make sure that we're a part of a tribe. And being different sends up those flares. And again, this is that place where you're balancing one consciousness and another, and where are you putting your attention? And I want to be clear here that balancing this is not about fighting one or another. It's ultimately about shifting state in a way that brings you fully in alignment with who you truly are. And then you roll this other consciousness into that consciousness so it supports and uplifts with you, as opposed to fighting with you. We are in a society and trained into an experience that wants you at odds with yourself, that wants you to fight against the aspects of who you are. And I'm not saying that as a conspiracy process. I mean, just watch commercials for 10 minutes. It doesn't require a lot of attention. But recognize that's how we get manipulated. It's how we get moved to buy things. It's how we get moved to eat things. It's how we get moved to think things, because that fear-driven machine knows what it's doing. And so if it can keep the parts of us divided and separate, then we no longer rely on self for change, or we rely on self for clarity. We begin to go back outside of ourselves. So I'll be different is a very positive statement and a very necessary place to be, because if you're feeling the pull of change, if you're desiring change at whatever level, that pull and that desire for change is because what's in front of you is not satisfying, is not lifting, is not taking you where you want to go, as Jeff was saying. It's not dialing you into who you are. So yeah, you'll be different, hopefully in a way that will greatly satisfy you and have you feeling pretty extraordinary about yourself.
The term different, wow, all the way back to the very dawn of time, same correlates with safe, and different correlates with danger. So just the same, S, safe, S, D, different, D, danger. Just amazing how deeply entrenched those words are, that when we think about being different, there's some disturbance, another D word, that comes into our field that we have to deal with. And oftentimes these are sub-perceptual, subconscious, unconscious experiences. We can convince ourselves with that 2 to 5% of our mind that we call the conscious mind that the change is necessary, the change is good, the change is needed, it's time, all that sort of thing. But if we don't sit with ourselves and go into meditation and have some kind of a spiritual practice to access that subconscious, unconscious part of the mind that is resisting the change, it'll be quite a struggle, more so than it needs to be. So there has to be, well, to do it efficiently or more easily, if you get the whole mind on board in the change process, not just the conscious mind, then the change will be welcomed, and the difference will feel unique in a authentic way. and it'll just feel like, oh, these shoes fit really nicely. So we go back to the shoes metaphor again.
It all comes back to the shoes. All right, belief number 3. I don't know how. And thank God for that. Guys, here's the one of the people I absolutely respect, and one of his messages that I absolutely love is stay away from the cursed hows. You don't need to know how. You never needed to know how. What you need is to get clear and create. And creation simply requires your attention to something that you are attempting to bring into manifestation, whether it's a feeling, a thought, an idea, whatever it is, if it's a car, if it's a house, whatever. The greatest use of your energy is to stay focused and to begin to feel into that thing. Because remember, we talked about before, everything we want is because we think we'll feel better for having it. So what is that better feeling? If you're staying connected to the better feeling and you're enjoying and indulging in seeing all of the wonderfulness and feeling all the wonderfulness of this change, then the how will unfold for you in the best possible way, because we are limited by our 5 senses in the time and space reality. So there is only what you're receiving in 5 senses that you're able, I mean, yeah, of course, intuition is a huge part of this, but most of us don't go there. Most of us stay in the how place. We stay in the what I can see, what I can feel, what I can taste, what I can touch, what I can do in that fashion. And what I'm going to encourage you to say is, good, don't know how, you don't need to. It will unfold. Remember, be, do, have. Being in your own energy, being in your field, and creating a focus, moving that focus to a specific place because you know you're going to feel better by being there. So I'm feeling it now. I'm like, yeah, I love this feeling. And I love that in this new place, I'm creating a new house, maybe. In this new home, I love the space. I love what it looks like. I love what it feels like. And I don't have to get into specifics like in a crazy way. I can let them unfold because that's part of the joy of it. But I don't have to worry about how I'm going to get from here to there. I just know I'm going to get there. And every day something inspires me to move closer to that. And the path will unfold beautifully if you stay out of the hows. So don't know how. I encourage you.
Yeah, that's good info there, Jim. Though typically in the course of a year, I may have 15 or 20 people that want to start a diet and exercise program. And they always ask, which exercise program should I do, or which diet should I follow? Because there are so many, and so many can even oppose or contradict one another. And I always, generally, I don't know if it's always, but generally I will have some kind of a comment about the exercise program that's most important for you is the one that you will do. It isn't the one that is the most popular or the one that gets the best results in the least amount of time. It's the one that you will actually do. So you have to go out there and experiment with a few of the hows or the technique part of whatever the change is that you're trying to make. But ultimately, it's always going to come back to what feels right and fits right for you. And the how is so much less important than the why. And the why always goes back to, how will my life be different when I put this change in place? And is that difference going to warrant the time, energy, money, and effort that it takes to bring about this change? And the answer hopefully is going to be yes. If the answer is no, then stop. Go a different route. Go a different direction. But it is interesting. I find it interesting, and the number 3 belief that Jim has put together for us to talk about today is a showstopper or a resistance multiplier, where people can use the I don't know how as an excuse to not step into the change that they want to make. There was a time where you didn't know how to walk. There was a time you didn't know how to talk. There was a time you didn't know how to ride a bike. And using the bike riding analogy, it's not something you can watch somebody else do. Yes, you can watch someone else do it, but you cannot know how to do it simply by watching someone else do it.
Why is that?
It has to be experienced.
Why is that?
Does it have to be experienced?
Yes.
Well, there's so many facets.
What are you getting to? What is the primary thing you have to experience in order to be able to ride a bike? It begins with a B.
Yeah.
Yes, balance.
Yes.
Sorry, that's an important foundational piece.
Mm-hmm. And so that's something that, again, you can't observe. You can watch somebody else balancing on a tightrope or something, but until you get on it and start doing it, all the little fine muscle motions and movements and anticipations and responses, that's something that only you can do, and you can only do that with your own experience. And that kind of takes us back to one of our core principles about our Adventures in Truth mantra, is that truth can't be told, it has to be learned. And we learn that through our own experiences, which is what Jim and I are sharing. Not saying that we are the truth or have the truth or know the truth. We're simply sharing our experiences as we have challenged ourselves to ask questions and be willing to talk about unpopular or awkward, difficult subjects that other people have tried to tell us what the truth is. And we're like, well, wait a second, that actually doesn't match my experience. So I don't agree that that's the truth. Anyway.
And to Jeff's, to the analogy of the bicycle and the balance, the thing that's so significant about that, and to Jeff's point about truth, is that the reason you learn to ride a bike is because you have to go internally and find that center within yourself. You have to dive into self, because you can look at YouTube all day and you'll never learn how to ride a bike. You'll learn how to hold the handles, you'll learn how to put your feet, you'll learn how to sit, you'll learn how to maybe sit your back so your back doesn't hurt. But the reality of riding a bike is that you have to go internal. You have to go to that space and find your balance. That's like the most amazing lesson ever, because it applies to everything. So moving on to number 4, as our time is moving on here, I won't be lovable. This ties somewhat into the I'll be different phase. But this is one that kind of, this is like, okay, the different one didn't work. I'm going to double down, but I won't be loved if I do this. The people that I want to love me won't love me anymore. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. And I say that tongue in cheek, but I say it seriously, because you are lovable already anyway. So the change that you are attempting to make is a change to further express your love of self. So you're already loving yourself into a new place. While it may feel uncomfortable, it may take time to integrate, and you're not sure how you're navigating it, the fact that you did it is a statement of the trust and love you have for the self and the expansion of self. So I won't be lovable is saying, I'm not going to be acceptable to people who are not willing to meet me where I am, wherever that may be, and where I am is changing. So if they're not meeting me where I am, then they don't necessarily love me. Would that be a good potential understanding there? Food for thought.
Yes. And if the change you want to make is ever results in somebody not loving you because of a change that you made, and we're not talking about, I'm curious about Satanism and I want to become a Satanist, that could cause some people to no longer trust you or want to be associated with you. But if they actually stopped loving you, then it was never love to begin with, because it was conditional. So love isn't conditional. And the way that we overcome this idea that if I make this change, whatever it is in my life, that people won't love me, then there was never love there to begin with. There was simply an acceptance based on you following a set of rules or guidelines or credos or whatever that the other person supported and believed. So therefore there was more of an alliance. You had an alliance with them. You didn't really have a love-based relationship with them. So love is accepting. Love is tolerable. Love is permissive. Love is encouraging to explore and encouraging to invent and change. That's the nature of love, is it's permissive. It isn't restrictive.
And as a shameless plug, our latest episode out on the podcast network right now is What's Love Got to Do with It? And in that podcast, to what Jeffrey is speaking of, we go deep into the process of what is love. So join us on that podcast when you have a second, because it'll fill in some gaps here for you, potentially. And so moving on, I won't be lovable. Let's go to the fifth one. The fifth, am I enough? So now we've gone through to me, the first four beliefs are sort of really, really, really strongly lodged into the ego part of our experience. This one kind of takes a little turn. It's now, okay, I've tried all these other things to distract you, and that's not enough. So maybe if I can start thinking about whether I'm enough for this change, then that'll derail this process. And again, am I enough? Are you enough? What? What is it you think you're not enough of to be able to increase your vibration? Is it possible that the enough feeling may be the disparity you feel between where your vibration is currently and the vibration that you are attempting to achieve? And so the enoughness is saying, I don't know if I'm enough because I can't see through the door I haven't walked through yet. And the enoughness is walking up to the door, turning the door and opening it and walking through. That's all the enoughness is. It's showing up at the door because the door is there now to be open for you to step into new opportunity. And no, you're not going to know that new opportunity with standing on the other side of the door. So you can stand there going, gosh, I just don't know if I'm enough in front of the door. I just don't know if I'm enough to make this change. Well, you don't know. You're still staring at a door. You're not stepping into the new reality. Until you step into that new reality, then everything opens up, everything unfolds, and you see not only are you enough, you're way more than enough, and you get to learn the steps of how to integrate this new change that you want to bring about to your experience. So the am I enough game, one that can trip us up crazy like, because it speaks to that core idea that maybe I'm not. And it's a fallacy. It's an illusion, and it's a story.
When I was sharing my experience of going grocery shopping at Ralph's with the masters, and the checkout lady recognizing instantly who she was when she was able to see herself the way the masters see her, it was fascinating that there was so much of her in who she was that she could immediately recognize how out of place she was, where she had gotten very comfortable with being a store clerk, and all the people around her were kind of operating at that same level. And then, like I said, in the twinkling of an eye, when she could recognize who she truly was, knew that there had to be a different place for her to be spending her time, so that she could be practicing her purpose. But like you were saying just a moment ago, we are way more than enough to do anything that we are willing and brave enough to consider, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And you will know that once you know who you are, you will know why you're here. Again, you got to put it in that order. So many people are trying to figure out step 2 before they do step 1. And there's a whole industry built on, career counseling and career coaching and all this sort of thing, when people really don't know who they are. So this is a core question in understanding who you are, that I am enough. I was sent here to the planet as a representation of divine masculine, feminine energy. And that is more than enough to do anything. So many different scriptures say, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains, and you do greater things than I, performing miracles and whatnot. So, and that applied to everybody. It didn't say if you study this for 10 years or if you do 300 push-ups in 5 minutes or whatever. There was no badge that you had to achieve or no goal that you had to reach. It was applicable to everybody on the planet, by simply believing that we are here, we chose to be here, that we came here for a reason, to learn lessons of love, acceptance, understanding, tolerance, patience, kindness, selflessness, acts of service. All of those things make us candidates for being enough. It's only the mind that can limit itself through tapes we've heard, through messages that we've listened to, through arguments we've gotten into, through disagreements, through whatever, that we would entertain the idea that I might not be enough, and therefore we'll play small, we'll hide, we'll reduce my light rather than shine my light. This notion of being enough is truly a lie. It's truly a distortion of truth. And it's just something that over time you'll learn to laugh about, laugh at when it shows up, because it'll show up from time to time. Even if you've mastered it, the masters periodically bring old lessons back for the sake of knowing that you've already learned this one, and it gives you a chance to defeat it once again, or to just let it be annoying for a while and then it's gone. But yes, we absolutely came here enough. We are enough. We always will be enough. And you don't even need anybody to align with you. If you lived your whole life in solitary confinement, which to some is the most serious form of abuse or torture that you can imagine, you would still be enough. If nobody ever agreed with anything that you ever said or desired to do, you would still be enough. That the external world, the external sources of validation will never satisfy. You can chase all of them. You can have everything. You could own the world and not know who you are and know what you're here to do, and you'd still be empty, because that's not how you become enough. You don't fill up your bank account, fill up your house, fill up your wallet, whatever. That's not where enough comes from. Enough comes from your alignment with the Creator and the dimension that you walk in on a daily, moment by moment basis is what makes us enough.
Good stuff. And we had intended to really dive into a whole section on reframing, and we are coming close to our time is up. But I want to throw this out there as a way of sort of a teaser for joining us next week to actually focus on the reframing process. What is reframing? I'm going to talk about for just a second. The idea of reframing is that once you have now made this decision and you step boldly into this change that you are embarking on, that the reframing is understanding that human beings, as a rule, tend to look back in history for meaning and understanding. And what reframing does, what Jeff and I as truthologists do, is we reframe the ideas that are presented in a way that gives you a different perspective. And that's the same tool that you need to start building with self. We'll get into that more next week. Loving this conversation, and hopefully this conversation about change has helped you to better feel comfortable about the process of change, at least to be able to understand the dynamic of the energy within change, and sort of dispel some of the illusions that we have within our own consciousness, because it's how we've been trained and programmed about why change is difficult or challenging or hard or any of the above. But we greatly appreciate you being here with us. Please take a moment to like and share and subscribe to our shows. And we'll look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Jeff, thank you for another great topic and another deep dive on a good subject.
Yeah, you put it together, Jim. So kudos back to you.
Thanks, man. Everybody out there in LiveCast land, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here. And we will look forward to seeing you next time on Adventures in Truth podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.